Okay, hello and welcome to number 4. This is our 4th lesson in a series of 6, all about the Norfolk Broads. And as normal, we're going to start off by just recapping our memory about what we did last lesson. So this is the time for you to perhaps take a quick flick through your work from last time. And these are the questions that we're going to pose. Firstly, to the nearest million, how many tourists does the Broad receive each year? That's number 1. Secondly, what does the acronym GIS stand for? And thirdly, which site in the Broads is the busiest? Right out, the busiest on the water. So you can pause me now if you like, take a few minutes to flick through and work out those answers. Okay, so this is today's title. If you can put this into your book, Stakeholders in the Broads. That's today's title, and if you can underline that. In today's lesson, we are going to be looking at this term, stakeholders. It may be one that you're familiar with, but it may not be. It seems like a bit of a strange term when you take it in its own there without kind of putting it in a context. So we're going to first of all understand and define that word stakeholders. And we're going to try and link that to how we can make that word relevant to the Broads. We're going to be developing our skills of note-taking today, and we're actually going to be hearing directly from 6 key stakeholders within the Broads National Park. Once we've done that, having listened to the opinions of a number of different local people here and tourists to the park, we're then going to be considering the relationships between the different stakeholders in the Broads and how they are all generally connected. So that's today's lesson. Now, as this lesson is all about stakeholders, it's important at this stage that we are confident that we know exactly what a stakeholder is. So we would refer to a stakeholder as anybody, a person or a group, who've got a particular interest or involvement in an area or in something or somewhere. So this chap here is a fisherman. He has a particular interest in the waterways of the Broads, and that they're kept clear and the stocks of fish there are well maintained, and that parking in the area is going to be good, and generally access is going to be good for him. So he's got a particular interest in the Broads. Equally, the people that row up and down this part of the river here would be stakeholders. They have a particular interest in this part of the Broads. So we've actually got a large amount of different groups and different people who you could class as stakeholders. What I'd like you to do at this point again is pause me and see if you can come up with 5 different types of stakeholders that you might expect to see in the Broads. So hopefully you have been able to write down a little list of some of the key stakeholders, or the stakeholders that you feel have got a role within the Broads, and we're going to hear from now 6 different stakeholders, and some of these people represent groups that you may have just written down. So farmers, for instance, are clearly a local stakeholder. Local residents as well have clearly got a specific interest in this area. I'm going to just introduce you to these people here on the screen. And in a second, you're going to watch a short documentary where each of these people have been interviewed. And we're asking them questions about how they interact with each other and how those stakeholders do something called collaborate, which means working together. So first of all, in the top left-hand side of the screen, we've got a man called Nick. And Nick works for the Broads Authority. And the Broads Authority have got a responsibility to manage the Broads. They are the overall organisation whose responsibility it is to manage and to maintain and to care for the Broads landscape. So they're clearly an important stakeholder in this area. Next to Nick, on the right hand side of him, is a lady called Hannah, and Hannah is a farmer, and she oversees actually a number of different businesses. So traditionally farmers would either rear livestock, or they would grow crops, or they might have perhaps a mixed farm where they did both of those things. But now increasingly farmers are actually changing and expanding the nature of the things that they do and doing something which is called diversification. So diversification is where you change the nature of your business and you make it more varied by adding new different ventures to that business. And for farmers, they're in a strong position to do this because they often have the land to grow a new business, or they have the buildings to put a new business into. So very often farmers in places that are popular with tourism can take advantage of that by creating businesses such as guest houses or bed and breakfast, or maybe campsites. They might do things like pony trekking or quad biking. They might perhaps build a golf course on their land. So there are a number of ways in which farmers can diversify and change their business. So we're going to speak to Hannah and hear about how she's done that. The third person along is a lady called Jen. She was visiting the Broads this summer from Manchester, and we're going to speak to her and find out about how she interacted with different stakeholders while she was here and the experience that she had when she visited the Broads. On the top right of the screen is a lady called Claire. She represents Horning Sailing Club, which is one of many different sailing clubs in the Broads, where their members get out and about on the Broads and on the rivers. And so again, we're going to speak to her and find out about her role and how her members use the Broads and how they interact with these different stakeholders as well. Bottom left is a very important group. That's a chap called James and his wife Charlotte. They're representing local residents. They live in a place near Coltishall, which is kind of in the northern part of the Broads, and they're going to be talking to us about how they've worked with the Broads Authority in the past and the different stakeholders that they interact with as well. And then finally, the lady on the paddleboard there is a lady called Sarah, and she'll be telling us about her business and again how she has worked with the different stakeholders in the Broads to develop and grow her business. So, as I say, we're about to watch a documentary where all 6 of those people are interviewed. Those interviews will be structured around 5 or 6 different questions that all of those stakeholders will be asked. They'll be slightly different questions, but essentially we'll be trying to extract from them the same kind of things, how they link to the different stakeholders that we will be talking to. So what I'd like you to do is to pay attention to those interviews. So first of all, make sure you're listening to what those people are saying, but at the same time, have ready, and get this ready with you now, a piece or a few pieces of rough paper where you can be writing down some notes from these interviews as you hear them. Now, in particular, I'd like you to listen out for some key information. And what you might want to do is to, at the start of each of the interviews, because there's going to be 6 different sections for each of the different stakeholders, is maybe write down the name of the person who's being interviewed and the stakeholding group that they're representing. So, for instance, we've got Nick here on the screen. So when Nick starts his interview, write down Nick and write down the Broads Authority. Listen out in their answers then for specific things that they're saying and specific relationships that they have. So particularly, you perhaps might want to write down any figures that they mention, any dates that they mention, particularly Nick and Hannah, our farmer, and also any place names as well when they're referring to particular places where they may travel to or where tourists may go to. For each of the questions that they're asked, try to make at least some notes or take some notes, but don't worry too much about writing everything down. You know, just make sure that the key thing is that you're listening to what these people are saying. So when you're ready, I will move on to the next slide. And if you want to just pause for a second and get all of your things together that you need to take some notes, then do so and press play again when you're ready to move on.
Okay, my name is Nick Sanderson. I work for the Broads Authority, and the Broads Authority are the organisation that was set up by Act of Parliament to look after the Broads National Park. We've been operating for about 30 years, and we have 3 main purposes. We've got a duty of protecting the wildlife, conserving the natural heritage, and the landscape of the Broads. And the second purpose is to promote opportunities for understanding and recreation in the Broads. The third purpose is to look after the interests of navigation, because there are about 12,000 boats that use the Broads, and they need somewhere to sail, and that's a very historic activity. So those three purposes form the duties of the authority. So we work with lots of landowners, farmers in particular, because everything that's put onto land around the Broads and the rivers finds its way into the water of the rivers and the Broads. So if the farmer is putting any fertilisers on, then it can find its way into the water and cause pollution problems. So we work quite closely with landowners to try and alleviate that sort of problem. But also we work with them to give them advice about conservation stewardship schemes, higher level stewardship schemes, and various other government-led initiatives to make sure that the Broads habitats are in good order. So the authority works quite closely with the tourist industry. There is an organisation called Broads Tourism, and we work with Broads Tourism, all sorts of businesses throughout the Broads, to promote tourism. We run the Visit the Broads website, which lists all sorts of activities and things people can do. We promote the Broads nationally and even internationally. We look for initiatives and opportunities for funding to get visitors to come to the Broads. The authority is a relatively small organisation with quite a big job. We employ directly about 100 people in the winter months, and then that increases to about 150 in the summer, because we take on a lot of seasonal employees to work with visitors, and we employ seasonal rangers and various people to look after the boats on the water, the navigation quays, the yacht stations and things like that. We work quite closely with local sailing clubs. I mean, sailing is what the Broads is all about. It's quiet recreation. We work with sailing clubs on a local level. The rangers all have good relationships with the local sailing clubs, and we're the planning authority for the area. So we work with sailing clubs in terms of any buildings they want to put up, or any improvements to the quay heading next to the water, or anything like that. So stand-up paddleboarding is really an interesting development for the Broads. We've seen an increase in the number of stand-up paddleboards out on the water this year, and we see this as really good news. It's a very quiet form of recreation. It's great for health, but it does very little damage to the environment. So we're very keen that it expands. We're working with a company to promote a junior triathlon for paddleboarding, and this is a really good thing for the authority. We would like, though, to make sure that everything's safe. People wear buoyancy aids, or at least tethered onto their boards, and also that all the boards have paid their toll, to make sure that it's all literally above board.
Hiya, so I'm Charlotte Halls, living here in Halstead, next door to Coltershall. My husband and I and our little girl, we've lived here for just a year, so not long. We've wanted to live here for years and years, so we've just got a lovely house, lots to do to the house. It's the beginning of a big project, but we couldn't be happier. We absolutely love living here, it's wonderful.
Hi, my name's James Halls. I'm a resident at Horsted. I live here with Charlotte, my wife, and our child Heather. My involvement with the Broads Authority has been through planning. So when we wanted to improve our home and build a conservatory on the front of it, I had to get involved with speaking to the Broads Authority because they had to approve the plans that we made, so it was in keeping with the local area.
So yeah, tourism in the area, it creates work for so many people. Personal experience, from the age of 15, 16, certainly 16, I got a job in a pub. My sister worked there as well, my mum worked there. I also had work on local boats, cleaning the boats, so tourism created a lot of work for me when I was younger.
Tourism's really benefited me as a local to this area. I grew up around here, and my first jobs were all in tourism. So I worked in a local restaurant serving tourists that came to stay. I also worked at a couple of theme parks locally, which served really just tourists in the area. So one way that we support our local farmers is that our local shop, our Farm to Fork, uses very much local produce, and also the restaurants in the local area and the pubs and stuff use the local produce in their restaurant, in their menus. So we go and eat there wherever we can. We try and put money back into the local area because we know it goes directly to the farmers in the local area as well.
Paddleboarding is something I'd never tried before, and I thought I'd be really useless at. But on one of our walks around the village, we bumped into a couple who had moved here not long before us, and they've set up a paddleboarding company locally. So we thought, why not give it a go? My husband and I have been going fortnightly now for a few months, and fell in love with it. The first couple of lessons I was useless, he was brilliant, obviously. But yeah, we're going to keep doing that. It's really, really fun, and I can see the popularity of it has bloomed in the area. Lots of people are now giving it a go, of all ages, which is really nice to see.
One of the main reasons we moved here in the first place is just because we've got so much water on our doorstep, and I'm a really keen sailor. So any chance I get when the sun's shining, I get the dinghy out and we go on the water and hopefully get the wind in our sails.
So I'm Hannah Dean, and I live at Lound Farm Hickling, and we run a traditional family arable farm where we have wheat, peas, potatoes, barley, and we grow haylage and hay for the horse market. And alongside that we have some grazing where we have cattle and sheep on the farm, but then a big chunk of what we do now is tourism. So our old milking parlour and all our old cattle sheds were converted about 16 years ago now into bed and breakfast, weddings, functions and events on the farm. So in the middle of our working farmyard we have all our holiday accommodation, and also on the farm we have 3 holiday cottages. So being a business in the Broads, we obviously do have relationships with the Broads Authority. Particularly in the early days, we needed support in how to gain funding, and we needed support in linking into local tourism businesses, which is where they were most useful. And in terms of gaining planning permission and details, they always like to see what we are doing here and seeing how we're impacting on the environment around us. So a big part of what we do with our guests is we want to encourage them to explore the area. So on our website before they come, there's lots of links to good places to visit locally. We also map out days out. So we have a day out on the Broads which involves going to Ramworth and How Hill and exploring the area like that. And another great place where we promote our guests to go is the Barton Boardwalk, because there's a lot of people who want to explore the Broads area, but they don't necessarily want to get on the water and go on a boat themselves. And then once our guests arrive here, when they're having their breakfast, we chat to everybody and just look at what their plans are for the day and help with our local knowledge, help them find the best places to go. And on top of that, we have the farm, the sort of 360 acres. And if we've got keen wildlife photographers, keen bird watchers, we point them in the direction of what they might be able to see. At the moment, we've got cranes going over every morning. So we're pointing people in the direction of those, because they get a better stay with us if they get a good experience of the local area. It's no good them staying with us thinking, gosh, isn't the dairy barns lovely, but actually not knowing where to go and not knowing where to explore. So local knowledge is really, really important. So on the farm we don't employ any additional staff, it's just my husband working on the farm, and when we need contractors they come in and do the combining and different jobs for us. In the bed and breakfast and wedding barns we employ a lot of local people, so in total we have about 9 or 10 part-time staff here. Some purely come in and help with the weddings and the functions, and then I've got other people who come in and clean, serve breakfast, and are generally part of the team here. It's a small business, so we like everyone to muck in and do a little bit of everything, but everybody who we employ comes from within about a 5-mile radius. So the waterways of the Broads are really important to us. As a family, we don't spend much time on the water because my husband's always too busy farming. But as a child, he grew up on the Broads and he knows the Broads and sailing like the back of his hand. Our guests, so many come purely so they can sail. We have a lot of guests who go to Hunter's Boatyard, which is a lovely traditional boatyard on the Broads at Ludham, and they stay with us and they spend their days sailing on the Broads. And more paddle boarding and kayaking is becoming incredibly popular with the younger generation, and there's quite a few local companies. There's the Canoe Man, there's Norfolk Outdoor Adventures down at Hickling Broad, and they offer paddle boarding and kayaking courses and like evening sunset paddles and things like that. And we have a lot of people who come and stay with us now specifically with the purpose of doing those activities.
So I'm Sarah Bradford and I run Secret Sup, a very small paddleboarding company here in Coltishall on the Norfolk Broads. We set it up about 2 years ago, and the inspiration came from being water people ourselves. I've always sailed all my life, and it was when we went down to the West Country a few years ago and we noticed paddleboarding has taken off everywhere. And we looked up here in Norfolk and actually saw there was only one place that was doing it, and we thought, let's give it a go. And so 2 years down the line, we now run the company. We take people out for lessons, we do hire, we enjoy doing lovely exploration on this beautiful bit of river. We enjoy seeing everything from kingfishers to herons to otters, taking people out, sunrise, sunset, and it's just proved a really lovely way of life for us. So the Broads Authority have played a really big role in how we operate. Before we even set up, we had to seek their permission and they had to come and check us out to make sure that we were very safe and within their own operating guidelines. And once we got the ticket from them, we got our Broads Authority paddle scheme licences for our board, so they're all tolled. We give a little bit of money to them, and of course that goes towards their main job, which is actually maintaining the waterways. And so we often see the people up here pruning the riverbank, taking down trees, cutting the weed. They keep the waterways beautiful for everybody. And of course they also keep them safe from a boat traffic point of view, and you'll see quite a few rangers coming up and down here and just making sure that there's no silliness going on in the water and that it's a safe place for everybody to enjoy. The Secret Sup's actually a very small company and we run it between us, myself and my husband. But this year we've noticed a massive increase in demand, and so I have had to call in a little bit of help. Just some local casual help to help me literally with scrubbing down the boards, putting them back in the water and turning around rentals. So when we started Secret Sup, we weren't quite sure who our clients were going to be. We know that the Norfolk Broads is a popular tourist destination, but at the same time, where we are here in Coltishall, there is nowhere that you can hire a boat or hire a canoe. So actually we wanted to target the local area as well to see if we can get them embracing the water and love it in the same way as we do. And so we set this up, we started very small, and we are still very small, but actually it's been very interesting to see how the business has evolved. We started very much with the locals, and it has generated this really lovely vibe of locals getting on the water. They came to us for the initial lessons, and now you see lots of people out on the water and just enjoying it, not ever realising that they had this facility on their doorstep to enjoy. So we feel quite proud of that actually we've got the locals embracing where they live and loving it and just being out in the water. But of course there's the tourism side of things as well, and particularly during these peak months of June, July and August, we do get quite a few tourists that come along, because of course they come to the Norfolk Broads and they want to have something to do, and the water is really the major draw because there aren't very many footpaths that you can walk along, and there are no hills that you can go and stand on to go and see down onto the water. So actually the only way to enjoy the water is to be on it, whether you're in a boat, a paddleboard or a canoe. And so our tourists are a really, really important part of our business. So in terms of working with local farmers, farming and paddleboarding doesn't really go hand in hand. However, there is a beautiful plot of land opposite us which is owned by a local landowner, and he's looking to set up a glamp site next year right on the river. So we're already looking at how we can expand this business to provide a lovely niche experience for everybody on this beautiful bit of river, and quite possibly looking at working with a farmer next year to make that all happen, because they're all diversifying. It's not all about crops and cattle anymore, it's about using their land to the best of their ability and to servicing the needs of the market. And in Norfolk it's becoming more and more about the tourism. So at present we don't work with any sailing clubs, but I'm a sailor, my husband's a sailor, we've been sailing all of our lives, involved with all sorts of national, international competitions even. And the one thing we never had when we were sailing competitively was something to do when the wind dropped. And there's nothing more frustrating than going to a sailing club, whether you're going for a fun sail or you're going to go for a race, there being no wind and knowing what the heck am I going to do with my time when you're so ready to get out there. And of course, ever since paddleboarding came along, it is the ultimate light wind sport. And so as soon as you can't race anymore in your boat, you can just put your paddleboard in, get out on the water and find something else to do. And for me, that is where paddleboarding is so complementary to a sailing club. You can just get out there, you've got your wind range, you've got your sailing range, which is sort of 5 to 20 knots, and anything below that, you can go paddleboarding.
Hi, I'm Claire and I'm an instructor at Horning Sailing Club. Horning Sailing Club is a really busy, active club where we teach sailing to juniors and adults, and we're based on the River Bure in the central part of the Northern Broads. The Broads Authority is really important to the activities of the club. Obviously the Broads Authority maintain all the riverways and the navigational access on the rivers, and we sail on the river as well as on board at Horning Sailing Club. So that's really key. Activities that the Broads Authority will do include things like clearing the weeds on certain parts of the river at different times through the summer. They also maintain the river banks and the stay for people to moor up, which is also really important. Another really key activity which is important to our members is that obviously there's a speed limit on the Broads of 4 miles per hour for the most part on the river, and the Broads Authority Rangers are the ones who enforce that, and that's really important to keeping all of our club members safe on the river. So Horning Sailing Club usually has around 500 members every year. I've got a lot of family members, members who've been part of the club for a really long time. It's open to anybody to join. There's a membership fee that's payable every year, and families can join, children can come along and have lessons, which is available from the beginning of the summer in the end of May right through the summer holidays. So it's always really lovely to see new members joining. We're also in our way a sailability centre, which means we're able to have sailors come along who've got disability needs, and we've got provision to help people with all kinds of needs get onto the water. And the majority of our members are local people. People do come from further afield to sail at Horning, but a lot of our members are from local families and people who live close by to the club. So the club really benefits the local environment in terms of being a really good amenity for people, so that it's a really key way for people who live locally and who enjoy sailing to access and enjoy the Broads by becoming a member and getting on the water with us. In terms of the local economy, well, all of our members who own boats have then got requirements like boat repairs and maintenance and buying sails, so that drives and feeds into the local economy in terms of boat maintenance in the local boat yards as well. Yeah, we are proud that the club helps tourism on the Broads because we do a lot of racing on the river at Horning. Anybody can come down and watch, and it's a really beautiful spectacle to see, and it's really part of what some tourists come to the Broads to see. The other part of our activity which really boosts local tourism is a race we run at the beginning of June called the Three Rivers Race, which is the biggest inland waterways race in Europe. And it's a 24-hour endurance race, so boats come from all over the country to take part, dinghies, larger boats and river cruises. It's a 24-hour race, so that all of the races start from Horning on the morning of the Saturday, and then up to 24 hours to get home again, having cruised around a wide part of the Northern Broads and then back again. moment, lots of members of the club do have stand-up paddle boards, which they can launch from the club and enjoy the river that way. Lots of our members enjoy doing that, and stand-up paddleboarding has really exploded in the Broads the last year or so it's brilliant to see so many people enjoying it on the rivers. And because of that, it's something the club is actively currently looking at expanding and developing next season to see how we can have more provision for stand-up paddleboarding.
I'm Jen, I'm from Manchester in the northwest, and we've come down to the Norfolk Broads on holiday for the second time. We've brought our 1-year-old and our little dog. We came 2 years ago and really enjoyed it, despite the weather not being brilliant, and this year we've come down and the weather's 32 degrees and glorious. We like the Broads because it's very flat, which is good for the pram and also for long walks with the dog. So yes, we've used the Broads Authority website to plan our trip. We found a range of places that we could visit from there, including Whitlingham Country Park, which we visited on Monday. Yes, we have supported a few different farm diversification projects, such as where we're currently staying, which is or was a barn that's now been converted into 2 cottages. And we've also visited a farm yesterday at Rocks and Barns, which has a big play area and like an outdoor fun fair for small children. We also saw the farm animals and fed them while we were there. So we hired a day boat at the weekend and spent the day touring around the Broads. So we stopped at a few different parks for a little walk, let the little boy play on the grass and the dog run around. Before moving on to kind of the next stop, we stopped for a nice lunch at a pub on the way, and then carried on. Really, it was absolutely lovely weather, and we had a really enjoyable time on the boat, and we would definitely do it again. So we haven't actually done any stand-up paddleboarding while we've been in Norfolk because it's not really an activity for a 1-year-old. However, when we visited Fairhaven Nature Garden yesterday, there was a stand-up paddleboarding class going on at the same time down the Broads, and we said that that's something we definitely like to do when we came back in a few years when our little boy's a bit bigger. So I think tourism and our stay in particular has benefited the local community and the local area in many ways. First of all, from staying in this cottage and providing local people with some income, but also we've eaten out, we've bought food from the local farm shops and the local small independently owned stores. We've been to a range of different places which we've had to book and pay for on entry, such as Rocks and Barns, Fairhaven Nature Garden, Pensthorpe Nature Park. We've paid for car parking in various other places as well, such as Cromer. We've also visited various National Trust properties and bought ice creams, food and drinks from there too.
Managed to get quite a lot of information out of those interviews that we conducted this summer. I apologise that on some of those interviews I know the sound quality wasn't quite as perfect as we would like. Some of the days that we spoke to those stakeholders were very windy. We had a number of very windy days this summer, and so you may have noticed a little bit of background noise in some of them, particularly when we spoke to Claire at the Sailing Club. We were in a very exposed position and the wind was rattling through there, so apologies for that. But at the end of that documentary, you had those words come up on the screen. How are all of these stakeholders connected? Now, you should have, hopefully in front of you, a wide selection of notes, and we're going to use those notes now to try and draw the connections between these different stakeholders. What we'd like you to do here is, now that you have watched the documentary and you've heard from all of the different stakeholders, is to create something called a stakeholder collaborative web. So to do this, you're going to need a piece of A4 paper, and preferably turn that so it's on the kind of landscape, so it's on its side. And then, like you have on the screen here, I would like you to add the names of those different stakeholder groups around the edge of the page, like you can see here: the Broads Authority, paddleboard business, the sailing club, farmer, tourist, and the local resident. Then essentially what we're going to expect you to do is to use your notes and to draw arrows between each of those different stakeholder groups. And then on the arrows, like you can see on the examples here on the board or on the screen, to add in some condensed notes to show and to explain the relationship between those two different stakeholders. So for instance, if you take the paddleboard business as an example, you can see that from that word where we have the word paddleboard business on the screen there are several arrows going out from the word. So the top word, or the top arrow, is going towards the Broads Authority, and it says along the line there that the paddleboard business and the Broads Authority are connected because they're granted licenses, the paddleboard business, by the Broads Authority to operate, and they also pay a toll for each of the boards that they have, and that goes towards the Broads Authority maintaining the waterways. The paddleboard business are also connected to tourists because tourists provide a significant income and contribution to the amount of people that are actually using the paddleboard business, which is what Sarah said during her interview. In terms of their connection to the sailing club, well, at the moment she said that they don't have a connection with the sailing club, but in the future certainly they would like to explore the potential of working with sailing clubs to maybe offer that as something else that the sailing clubs do, or the clubs do perhaps on the days when they have the sailing events when the wind isn't perhaps blowing strongly enough for those events to happen. So I'd like you to spend some time now using your notes and using a plain piece of A4 paper to create one of these stakeholder collaboration webs. You can color code your web using a range of different colors to show perhaps all of the different stakeholders. For instance, you might choose to have the paddleboard business and everything relating to them in red and their arrows in red, but you will certainly need to use a ruler to draw the links between those different stakeholder groups. And I would certainly suggest that you use different color ink, different color pens to represent each of the different stakeholders. Okay, so if you pause me now, as I say, use your notes and you should be able to create a very elaborate web showing the connections between these different groups. Okay, so hopefully you've created something that looks quite in depth, quite complex, but certainly is showing that in the Broads and in many other places, it's important that people work together and collaborate. And very often there are events and opportunities where this collaboration is encouraged, because where you have people that are all invested and all wanting somewhere to be successful and to look good and to work well, it's important that all of the different people that have a role in those places pull together and work together, and it makes their lives easier. So in this lesson, we've looked at the term stakeholder and we've considered how these different stakeholders are relevant to the Broads. We've also developed our note-taking skills, and we've picked out notes from listening to those 6 different stakeholders. And then eventually we have used our notes to create that web, the collaboration web that we've just been referring to. So to finish off today's lesson, these are the 3 challenges that I would like you to take on. Firstly, I would like you to justify the top 3 most important stakeholders in the Broads, in your opinion. The second challenge, I would like you to quote one key fact from what you have learned from each of the interviews. So in fact, let's just do one. Quote one key fact you have learned from the interviews. And then finally, select the stakeholder who you consider collaborates most with others in the Broads, or who works most with others in the Broads. Who is this? What group was this? Okay, that's it for this lesson. We will see you again for lesson number 5. Again, well done today.